Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the Western civilized world and much of the Eastern civilized world, people are born into religions. By that I mean their mother and father were in a certain religion, and they were born and took on the tenets of that religion, and as children were taught that religion. We're taught how to act in that religion, what the rules and regulations were in that religion. Some of the things that came along with that teaching were the teaching of exclusivity, the teaching that that religion is somehow better than other religions, and that in order to reach the fruition of your journey in this world, you have to adhere to that religion. Because of that, there have been tremendous conflicts in the world based on religious indoctrination. And right now, they're going on. Hindus are fighting with Muslims. Muslims are fighting with Jews. Druze are fighting with Muslims, and so on and so forth. There are so many conflicts. Now, Sufism begins to explain that, yes, you have to be taught the basic of a religion. And yes, you have to know the basics of a religion. But it takes you further by telling you that there is no separation between you and your adherence to a certain religion and other people and their adherence to a different religion. Imagine that. There's no difference between you and your adherence to a certain religion and other people and their adherence to their religion. The essential essence of all monotheistic religions is similar. In order to step from the state of ritual worship, which is the early stages of religion, for some also the final stages of religion, and to step in to the open space that is God, there has to be a kind of transformation within us. There has to be an alteration of the way that we view things. There has to be a release of the belief in exclusivity. There has to be a release in the belief that there's only one way to God. It has to be understood that God created all the religions, not just one of them. And to try and make the one that you were born into exclusive is your own attempt to limit the nature of God. We must learn not to interfere with truth and not to make assumptions as to truth. Our ability to understand reality is limited. Now, it can grow over time, but it remains limited. God cannot be known by someone who is not God, and there is only one God. So there is a conundrum, a puzzle that you have to understand. God cannot be known by someone who is not God, because if he was known, then he would be God, because he would know what God is. So that conundrum has to be overcome somehow. And it begins by not limiting our understanding of God. And what we do is we limit God to our religion. We limit God to our faith. Shakespeare said, "A rose by any other name is still a rose." But people in religion don't believe that God by any other name is God. They think he's something different. And they all understand God is one. Well, if God is one, then all of these names are one. And a rose by any other name is still a rose. And this has to be applied also to religion. So if we're going to make progress in this place, we have to give up our grip on exclusivity and our grip that we, each of us, are somehow differentiated from each other of us. And those differentiations have to do with color, race, religion, language, nationality, as if these things make us different. None of these things make us different. They just are appearances that seem to make us different. So people in India are no different than people in Arabia. People in Africa are no different than people in North America. People in North America are no different than people in Australia. And people in Australia are no different than people in South Africa. They just think they are different. And because they, in their own minds, not in the universal mind, but in their own minds, believe in a certain structure in religion and certain rules and regulations in religion that if they are not followed, you have somehow stepped out of the purview and the protection and the covering of God. As long as you hold that belief, you can't believe truth because you deny yourself the ability to believe truth. It's only when you understand the unity among all mankind that you can begin to understand truth. And the fact that man performs certain rituals in one way or another way does not necessarily make them different or the same. 10 days after the beginning of the year, a new year, in Judaism, is something called Yom Kippur. In Islam, there's something called the 10th of Shaban. I think it's Shaban. And they're both exactly the same thing. They're the day the book of life is recorded. And uh, they both took on the same point of view. However, they're not called the same thing. They're not referred to the same thing. And if you ask most people, they don't know they're the same thing, but they are the same thing. So there are so many things that are the same thing that we push away. There are so many things that are the same things that we try to create differences in. Essentially, man has this thing we call an egocentric self. This egocentric self has certain requirements, and one of them is to maintain the importance of the self. The importance of the self in relationship to everybody else. So the self, I, am more important than every other I. And as long as we hold this belief, we are limited to the amount of progress that we can make. The I, we sometimes expand to the other people who are the same color as us. So when we say I, or when we talk about ourselves, we talk about our race. When we say I, sometimes we mean our religion. When we say I, sometimes we mean our nationality. But we're constantly drawing differences between the self or the club that the self is in and every other club, every other group, every other institution. In Sufism, there's a sliding scale, and it goes like this: Shariat, Tariqat, Hakikat, Marifat, Sufiyat. Sufiyat is when all religion disappears, and all there is the relationship between you and God. Nothing else is in between that relationship. Now, ordinary man who hasn't been brought into contact with this understanding and this teaching thinks they know God through their religion. But it's not so. You don't know God because of how many times you prostrate, prostrate. You don't know God because of how many times you go to church. You don't know God because of how many times you go to Mass or repeat the same words over and over. These magic formulas. There are no magic formulas to know God, but there is one word that's universal in every religion that brings you closer to Him. And that word is surrender. Surrender of what? Surrender of everything. Surrenders of your thoughts, surrenders of your ideas, surrender of your religion, surrender of your way of looking at things, surrender of your differences, surrendering the will to resist the relationship between you and God, and surrendering the need to exist as an individual. You see, this need to exist as an individual, an individuated presence, is the main source of egocentric dualism that separates you from truth, that separates you from everything. Yet, each of us holds on to it as if it was the core of our existence. And in truth, it's the core of our non-existence. Because we believe that, we don't exist in truth. We exist in imagination. To exist in truth, we have to disappear into truth. To exist in truth, we have to surrender to truth. And to do this takes a steel will and a constant reiteration of the fact that I do not exist, only God exists. At the core of unity is the repetition of the prayer, La ilaha illallah. I do not exist, only God exists. We are all from God and return to God. God is an illumination. God is a light. God is an eminence. God is radiant. God is an effulgence. An effulgence gives off light. An effulgence gives off rays. And these rays, in the time of creation, became souls, wrapped in the material essence, which is not effulgence. So we are of two parts. We are of effulgence and we are of not effulgence. We are of God and we are not of God. We are without form and we are of form simultaneously. Part of us is formless. Part of us is form. And what happens is that for almost all men, the physical visions, the physical interactions, the physical nature of our being is the overwhelming part of our being to us. We have more belief in that than we have in our non-form because we've never seen our non-form. We've never seen the non-form. So we believe in the form. And the belief in the form keeps us from the truth. There will come a day when the form will disappear. And this is part of the contract of life. When you're given life, you're given form. When you're created, you're given form. And then there comes a time when this contract ends. When the form no longer is the predominant element in your existence. As a matter of fact, it becomes your enemy. The form becomes that which betrays you in every step. The form becomes ill. The form becomes diseased. The form causes you problems. The form causes you all kinds of untold difficulties and suffering, yet you hold on to the form as if it's what's going to maintain you. When in truth, if you let go of the form, you can find out who you truly are. But whether you let go of the form voluntarily or not, the form is going to be let go of. That's what happens. The form is going to be let go of. It's not within our will to maintain the form. It's not within the nature of existence that the form is maintained. So when we do all of the rituals within religion, believing that these rituals somehow transcend form and enter into the spiritual world, that they somehow transform form and take us to another place. It's not so. We can't hold on to that which has form and go to the formless. We have to find that which is formless, hold on to that, become that, and move with that. So instead of our physical vision being what takes us from here to there, our love needs to be what takes us from here to there. And we have to develop love. Everybody has to love somebody. And that somebody eventually, as we reduce and reduce and reduce, becomes that one that is real, God. We need to love God. We need to interact with God. Our love must come from Him, go towards Him, and be inclusive of all that is around us. All of us are connected to Him. And a simple rule of understanding is that if you reject any being, you've rejected God. Why? Because that being has a soul. And where did that soul come from? It came from God. So if you reject a being, you reject a soul. You reject the soul, you reject God. You reject the unity that exists beneath the physical vision. You reject the unity that exists beyond the auditory. You reject the union that exists beyond the tactile interaction that we have with our senses. You don't believe in that which is beyond the senses. So love becomes a physical attraction. Love becomes a physical act. Love becomes a physicality as opposed to a spirituality. Divine love is what rules all of the universes. Divine love is what rules all of the world. Divine love has no physicality in it. Divine love has no transactional nature to it. Divine love gives, and divine love sustains. Divine love protects. Divine love is here as the great cure to all ills. And if we begin to understand divine love, then we begin to understand the unity of existence. And we have to hold on to this unity of existence. So the question arises, for instance, does one who portrays divine love, who loves everything that they see and everything that they talk to and everyone and holds no differences, does one who is like that and denies the existence of God because of the lack of scientific proof, are they somehow separate from the truth? Well, yes, they are. But they're separate in the same way that those who adhere to a belief system and say, I believe in God, but don't believe in love. I believe in God, but don't believe in mercy. I believe in God, but they don't believe in compassion. And when I say don't believe, I mean they don't do it. You can't talk the game. Sufism is not about words. Sufism is about actions and about transformation and about change and about understanding things in a new way and applying those changes to our lives so that our lives see things in a new way. Our lives apply things in a new way. You can talk about compassion all day long, but if a dog runs by you and you kick it, what's the use? The story I've told so many times about a sheikh is giving a discourse and somebody's knocking on the door. And one of the disciples goes, and the man is a beggar, and he says, "Can I have a piece of bread?" And the guy says, "Come back later. Our sheikh is discoursing." And when the dervish comes back to sit in front of the sheikh, he says, "Who was that?" And he said, "It was a beggar who wanted a piece of bread." He said, "Well, did you give him something?" He said, "No, I told him to come back later when you were done." He said, "Go chase him and give him a loaf of bread. How can you deny one who has a soul? How can you deny one who is the same inherently as we are, who is in terrible need right now? What you're doing is contrary to everything that I'm trying to teach you. What you're doing is contrary to all of the true rules and regulations. Here you are paying respect to the fact that I'm speaking and shouldn't be interrupted, but you're not paying respect to the need that this man has. You're not paying respect to his humanity through God. We need to pay respect to each other. We need to understand the truth in each other. Look at our little group here. We have people from every religion, from every walk of life, from every ethnic group, from all over the world. And there is a unity among the group that is very powerful. Differences, for some reason, and it's God's grace is the reason, have disappeared within this group. And we don't feel different from each other. We feel unified. And in that unity, we feel strength. And in that unity, we feel closeness to God. And we begin to believe that our journey is going to be fruitful and will be successful. And it will be. And part of what makes it so is this ability amongst ourselves to drop our differences, this ability amongst ourselves to let go of that which separates us and refuse to acknowledge separation, but to hold separation back and to understand that separation is that which blocks the gates of reality. Separation locks the doors to truth. Separation obliterates all of our good work. There are those I was talking to or he was talking, and I wasn't talking to him. He was talking about earthquakes in a certain part of the world and how they killed lots of people. He said, it doesn't matter. They're not like us anyway. And to him, the fact that the earthquake happened in an area of the world that wasn't of his ethnicity, it had no bearing. It didn't mean anything. He had no empathy towards others who weren't like him. And this is the great difficulty, or one of the great difficulties in the world. Empathy is limited to the ones who we consider part of our club. Empathy is limited to the ones we consider the same as us. We can't seem to cross over into the truth that we are all one. There's a famous story of a man in India who was on a long trip. He lost his water. He had been walking through the desert, and he could barely grasp his breath. And he was of a higher caste. And an untouchable came up to him. And in India, untouchable is the lowest caste. And to have interaction between one of the higher castes and an untouchable is unthinkable. But this man was dying. The untouchable lifted him up and gave him a little bit of water and helped him get well and walked him back to his house. By the time they got to his house, the man was better, and the untouchable took a step onto the sidewalk with the man of with the man of higher caste. And the man of higher caste looked at him and said, "You can't walk on the same sidewalk with me." and chased him away. He was embarrassed to be with him now that he'd regained his health. But when he hadn't had his health, he very easily took assistance from the untouchable. This problem of untouchability in India has, for a large part, been dealt with, but it hasn't been overcome. They still deal with that problem. And one of the things that happened in India is the untouchables changed religion because they couldn't bear the uh, burden of being untouchable within the Hindu religion. So they became something else. There are so many burdens that people have to carry. There are so many differences that we are involved in. We have to recognize the nature of these differences, and we have to be able to see through them. We have to be able to understand that these differences are not real. And to hold them up as real is one of the big mistakes that man makes in this world. God sent 128,000 prophets into the world. All of them came with the same message. All of them came with the same understanding of the truth. All of them brought unity. What happened? How did these messages of unity become messages of differences? How did these messages of unity become messages of separation? How did these messages of unity become messages of war? How did these messages of unity become messages of mass killings that were uh, somehow made okay because of the differences between people? When these things are let go of, man will become true man. Until that, he is not true man. He's an imitation of man. And so all of these people that we see walking around are not men. They're animals. They act like animals. They hunt in packs. They live in packs, except these packs sometimes are 10 million or 10 billion strong. But they're still packs. They're packs of wolves looking to live off the blood of others. They're looking to destroy others. They're not looking to have a true integration with other man. And to have that true integration, you have to see the love within other man and the love within yourself. And you have to recognize that that love is one and the same. And through imbibing that love without differences, you become more. You become greater than you were in your differences. Man is afraid to give up his differences because he thinks through surrender he will become less. In truth, he will become more. The spiritual world is the opposite of this world. The more you hold on to here, the wealthier you think you are. In the spiritual world, the less you have, the wealthier you are, because there's all these things you now don't have to give credence to. You don't have to think about. You don't have to spend time with. We must understand this turnaround. We must understand this truth. We must understand the release of the egocentric self and an entrance into the unified self, where we are at one with the universe and at one with each being in the universe, and simultaneously at one with God. And that's when we get to know the truth. We get to know ourselves and we get to know our Lord. May that happen for each and every one of us. May our hearts open so that they are big enough to include everyone we see and meet and greet. May our hearts open so that the whole world can live within us and we can live within the whole world and with God. May it be so for each and every one of us. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.